This is an ABC News special report.
Good morning, I'm Whit Johnson in New York, and we're coming on the air for what will be a history-making day at the U.S. Supreme Court on many levels. The justices releasing their final two decisions in what has been a very divisive term, at the same time marking the end of Justice Stephen Breyer's 27 years on the bench. Now, following the court's sweeping ruling on abortion, overturning Roe v. Wade, and after striking down New York State's gun control law about carrying concealed weapons, the court now handing down consequential decisions on both immigration and climate change impacting the entire country. On immigration, there's a key question that we're looking at here. Did President Biden unlawfully terminate the Trump administration's so-called Remain in Mexico policy? Now, the answer to that question turned out to be no, meaning the Biden administration can go ahead and move forward in ending that policy. But of course, it's sure to have a profound impact on immigration. Now, the second question here, climate change, a significant decision on how the EPA is allowed to enforce restrictions to protect the environment. And the question we're looking at, can the EPA issue rules capable of reshaping the nation's electricity grids, driving power companies away from fossil fuels? The answer there, technically no, although it's not a complete elimination of its power. It's just reducing what the EPA can actually do when it comes to things like climate change. Of course, profound implications, when it comes to other agencies as well. So let's get right to ABC's senior national correspondent, Terry Moran, who covers the Supreme Court for us. Terry. And Terry, big picture here on both issues. What is the impact across the board?
Two big cases here, really big cases, and President Biden's authority at stake in each one. He won one, he lost one. The win on immigration, as you just said, the Remain in Mexico policy that former President Trump had established, that President Biden had tried to remove. The court finds that the president does have the authority to end the Remain in Mexico policy if he chooses. The states of Texas and Missouri had sued the government trying to make sure that that policy remained in effect. But the court says that the law gives the president discretion to do that, and that the Constitution reserves foreign policy questions like, will we have negotiations with the nation of Mexico about all the migrants who have to remain there? That is the province of the president. So that's a big win for President Biden. On the law side, that's climate change. And in that case, the court, in both opinions, by the way, by Chief Justice John Roberts, the court sharply limited the ability, the authority of the government, the EPA, to limit greenhouse gas emissions. And they did so because they said that question, as it was addressed in the Obama administration, which set up a cap-and-trade policy trying to limit climate change emissions, that is the kind of question that is so large, affects so much of the American economy, that it requires Congress to address it and not an agency of the executive branch. And that not only will affect climate change in a major way, but it will also have ripple effects right through the federal government, because this is a landmark opinion saying, reviving the notion that on big questions of national policy, the national legislature, Congress, must make the law and the agencies execute it.
Cecilia Vega. Cecilia, you've been traveling with the president in Madrid right now. How does the administration move forward now that they have this win?
Well, I think they will certainly file this in the win category, Whit, because they have hit a number of roadblocks in court. You'll remember President Biden, of course, particularly when it came to immigration, campaigned on trying to overturn and undo so many of former President Trump's immigration policies. And this one was certainly at the top of the list. He had campaigned on this more humane approach to immigration. But I think it's really important that we spell out for our viewers what this policy did and why the administration wanted to undo it. Immigration rights activists in the White House said that sending people who were trying to come into this country to legally claim an asylum, make it a legal asylum claim, that they had to go back to home countries or go back to other countries, some of the most dangerous places in the world, and wait until their cases can be heard by an immigration judge. And they said that when they were back in these home countries, they faced horrific violence. We're talking about sexual assault and torture. And they are coming from some of the most dangerous places in the world, in Central America and Honduras, fleeing horrible gang violence and environmental environmental problems. And so this administration really said that this should not be the case. They should not face this danger when they go back across the country, which is why they wanted to undo this policy. Look, Whit, it's also important that we talk about the timing in which this is happening right now. That horrific case in terms of all of those migrants, 50+ migrants killed inside that truck there in San Antonio just the other day. 68 migrants caught at the border trying to cross, 58 of them children. We are talking about a time when the Border Patrol and border agents are on pace to see a record number of people crossing this year, on pace to beat last year's record. This is certainly immigration shaping up to be a major issue in the upcoming midterms. So the timing of this extremely important, but the Biden administration will very much see this as allowing them to sort of move on and get down to some of that business of undoing some of former President Trump's immigration policy. With.
Let's bring in ABC's Devin Dwyer, who also covers the Supreme Court for us. And Devin, as we noted there, the Biden administration is really going to have to take a second look at how they're going to approach their climate agenda from here on out.
Yeah, with the Supreme Court has long said that the EPA can regulate greenhouse gases, which are causing climate change. But today, they handcuffed the agency in terms of how aggressively it can go after those greenhouse gases. And make no mistake, this is devastating to climate advocates, especially the Biden administration, who had made the climate agenda a centerpiece of this White House. They want to roll back emissions in this country, a leading driver of global climate change. And this is a huge win, Whit, for the coal industry and those communities that support it. I spent a lot of time ahead of this case in Appalachia, coincidentally one of the communities hardest hit by the impacts of climate change, but they're very resistant to these sorts of regulations. 1.7 million jobs in that industry and related industries, and even though they are open to regulation, they want some some regulation to cap emissions at these power plants. That brings in jobs as well. There was real concern that generation shifting, requiring these companies to move towards solar and wind, was really a bridge too far, and we saw the court today agree with that. Whit.
All right, Devin, thanks. Let's bring in ABC's Kate Shaw, once again our legal analyst and ABC News contributor. And one of the things that we've been hearing about as it relates to climate change in the Supreme Court here is this major questions rule here, which basically says Congress must speak clearly if it's going to give broad powers to a specific agency. So beyond climate change and the EPA and what the EPA can and can't do now, what are the broader impacts here?
Well, Whit, this doctrine is not something that is written explicitly into the Constitution. It's a doctrine the court really started talking about in the 1980s, but you described it accurately. It's just basically the idea that Congress has to speak in really, really precise ways if it wants to give agencies the authority to act. And lots of statutes are broadly written. The part of the Clean Air Act that the EPA was relying on to issue this rule is written pretty broadly by design, and yet the court here says, no, that's not good enough to give EPA the authority it claims. And the logic absolutely could apply outside of the EPA. Actually, the court used similar reasoning to strike down several COVID policies, the CDC eviction moratorium and the OSHA test or vaccine mandate, both COVID approaches that the Supreme Court struck down on similar theories. So I think you see what Justice Elena Kagan said in her dissent is this is the court assuming for itself the power to make really consequential decisions, taking it from agencies, even taking it from Congress. And so the topic here is climate regulation, but I think the logic applies to all manner of questions and problems that government might try to address. And the court is here saying, we're going to second guess your ability to do that.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.